Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of BOF Live. I know I can speak for all of the BOF team and both of our guests today in sending our very best wishes to you all in these strange and challenging times. For this episode of BOF Live, we return to a series of BOF careers discussions launched this Monday with a conversation with Condé Nast Melinda Stevens. And the talks are designed to share insights on how the world of work is changing and how to navigate the situation we are faced with and acquire the skills necessary to deal with them. Today, our topic is best practices for communication during this crisis. And I'm thrilled to welcome Julietta, Dexter and Daniel Marks, the CEO and Chief Creative Officer of the Communications Store, to BOF Live. Both individuals possess a wealth of experience as advisors to industry-leading brands like Versace, Bottega Veneta, Glossier and Allbirds, and as the founder and leader of a global business with over 170 employees in offices in New York and London, who are dealing with the crisis just as we all are. Julietta, Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much to you and the team at BOF for having us.
We really appreciate it, Robin. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for agreeing to share your insights with our community. As we've discussed in preparing for the call, the crux of this discussion is communication outside of advertising, communicating with employees, communicating new types of information to consumers, communicating about industry collaborations, every imaginable form of stakeholder in a business outside of a consumer buying a product. And before we go into talk a bit more detail about internal and external messaging during times such as these, I wondered if there were ever, and Julietta, perhaps we should start with you. I wonder if there was an overarching lesson that has been immediately impressed upon you by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks, Robin. I think, first of all, I'd like to start by wishing everybody around the globe my best wishes to stay safe and stay healthy in these incredibly difficult times for all of us, wherever we are in the world. And I hope that number one lesson is that we all start to learn from one another and the different cycles the virus is having in different parts of the world. I think that's my lesson number one. As a planner and a strategist and as an entrepreneur, I plan everything to the last minute. And I guess my big learning is that it just doesn't go according to plan. And therefore, lesson number two for me personally has been to let go of plans and to learn to be agile and literally operate on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to having goals and ambitions that may now no longer be possible for this year or beyond. And I suppose the third lesson for me is really around what leadership is today and what it will come to mean tomorrow. And as the leader of an organization, of a group of, as you said, about 170 people in the US and London in the UK, I'm really having to challenge myself to think about the values that I bring to my leadership and how I take care of the people in my community. That has always been a very, very, very foundational principle of our business, of Daniel's and my business. And now we are being tested. This is not talking the talk, this is walking the walk.
And I think for me, Robin, this is bringing Julietta and I and our team, our family at TCS, so close together, even though we're apart and operating separately and from home. I think I'm amazed and inspired by the creative thinking of our teams and the opportunity to give different people a voice and who steps up, and also the resilience and the companionship, frankly, of our clients too. We have an extraordinary community, and I think everyone is there supporting each other through, we're not quite sure what. And I think sitting here and saying that we have the answers would be wrong. We just don't know what that looks like. And so we're facing every day as it comes. It's very difficult to make that not sound like a cliche, but in crisis management, the lessons we've learned over all of the years of doing that, never in this extreme, are, as Julietta said, you have to take each day as it comes, as the problems present themselves, deal with them, and really, above everything else, be incredibly transparent in all of our communications. And that's the only thing that is getting us through this is our openness and the openness of the partners that we have around the world.
Daniel, you mentioned both the companionship that your team and your clients have shown, but also the transparency of your communication. But I actually wanted to ask Julietta, who I know is more focused internally in terms of the messaging. What do you believe is the basis of a successful internal communication strategy during this crisis? We have very, very challenging times, and as you say, an increased amount of responsibility from employer to employee. I wondered if you could sort of take me through your approach and how you'd advise others.
I hope, Robin, you won't mind if it's a bit of a long answer, but the purpose of my answer is really to try and help listeners with what they might be doing in their own businesses. I think that the first thing is to decide on some pillars of how you're going to communicate. And for Daniel and myself and our community, we've decided on these 3 pillars. One is transparency, as Daniel just said. The other is preemption, and the third is compassion and empathy. So if you sort of set out your stall to decide what the strategic pillars of your communication with your community is going to be, I think that's very, very helpful, because what it does is it provides some form of consistency. The second thing is that we have sort of separated out our communications in 2 channels, in formal channels and in informal channels. So perhaps to start with, I should talk about the formal channels, which is largely being done over formalized emails, not just from Daniel and myself, but from our leadership team and also from our head of people and talent, Claire Birch. And therefore, we have got daily communications in line with government directive to make sure that by 9 a.m. or earlier, everybody has got exactly the information that they need and what protocol is needed in terms of people maybe not feeling so well, or whether there was ever office access or not. So all of that is being done on a daily basis. There's also very, very open lines of formal communication with leaders across the business, so that you have got somebody that you need to speak to and that they are there for you. Clearly, Zoom will be our new world, and therefore, again, Daniel and I feel extremely strongly that visual presence. And I actually had a wonderful email from a member of staff yesterday who said to me that her friend was working in a communications company and they hadn't seen the boss since they'd all gone home. And so Daniel and I feel very strongly that we want all of our community to see us. On the formal side of the communication, what people are feeling right now, outside of panic in some cases and fear, is uncertainty. And so going back to those pillars, in the formal channels, there is bad news around, things like job retention, furlough in the UK, in the US, people sort of being let go from positions. And so we feel that the most important thing in the formal channels is to reduce the uncertainty. And I guess that through Zoom, I'm facing my community and giving them the bad news live and face-to-face as best as I can. And then we've adopted the other channels, which is more of a Slack channel, where again, we are communicating with our teams every morning at 9 o'clock and every evening at 6 p.m. And literally, Robin, it could just be a tiny video from me every day saying, guys, I hope that you're going to have a great day today. Let's really do this together. Let's just get through today. Or a message of hope or good wish, or, sometimes I'm giving messages around parents who are now homeschooling. So one of our global advisors gave us a ton of information through EdTech around how we could help our at-home parents now school their kids. Other times I'm focused on people who are living alone in cities that are not their home country cities. And then sometimes we're trying to put some humor in there as well. On the 1st of April, we had the TCS hat challenge. So Daniel and I made complete idiots of ourselves. And then I've shared quite sort of home pictures of myself doing my yoga practice at 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's really how we've been coping with that right now.
I think also, Robin, really importantly, we had to get some messages out about taking time out and ensuring that you had time to breathe and time to walk and time to clear your head, because I think that there was a feeling amongst our teams that they had to be plugged into their computer, answering every email right the way through until late at night, because there wasn't that community spirit of walking into an office and walking out of an office. So where did life start and work stop? And we've been very clear with our teams that the mindfulness with which they have to approach this, the self-care that they have to adopt is as important to us as the dedication and work that they put into this. And you know, I think not making any assumptions. You know, we are able to take care of ourselves, and we're incredibly lucky, and we feel very privileged to be healthy and well, and that our families are the same. And there are many others that aren't, and feel that connection to work somehow can't stop because, God forbid, you should be off, but actually the off time is just as important.
How are you maintaining a dialogue between your employees and yourselves? I know a number of companies are using surveys to measure employee sentiment. There are, a variety of tools that, have been in existence for a few years, but are there any other ways that you have just managed to create a feedback loop that, allows you to just keep an eye out on your company, a pastoral eye out on your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the answer to that question is that Daniel and I are very blessed to work with an extraordinary leadership team. And clearly, with a group of people of 170 in 2 markets, you can't be close to everybody across the company. So I think that the 2 things that I would say are, number one, those very personal, private conversations are happening through our leaders. Our HR team is also extremely strong, and really we're small enough that we all know each other. So those people are working very, very hard at keeping that contact. And also over the last 2 weekends, I have explained on this format on Zoom that if anybody wants to speak to me or write me a question or Slack me, I will be there on the weekend for private conversations.
And I think, Robin, also we had instigated some time ago, actually, led by and inspired by the team, something called TCS Voice, which gives a platform to everyone within the business. It's made up of representatives from all different levels within the business to give feedback, to process information from us, to give incredibly constructive and helpful criticism, to tell us where we're getting it right, to tell us where we're getting it wrong. And certainly we're trying to use that platform where we can to help us support everybody, to actually mine creative thinking within the business. We can talk about that a bit later. And that has been an incredibly valuable tool. And we've been talking on Zoom as an entire team once a week when you have 170 people all tuning in. It's really lovely to see everybody's faces. It makes a huge difference and makes you feel incredibly connected.
I just want to change tack slightly and just think about internal messaging when they are broadcast externally. We've seen in the market, over the last year, 2 years, transparency has, evolved from a concept to arguably, some consumer behavior getting behind consumer sentiment. But recently, and in response to this crisis, Valentino announced that they would be supporting their craftsmen's wages, regardless of how long they were not in the ateliers, within 3 days. There are emerging designers are offering their, tiny production facilities to create masks. There seems to be a bleeding between internal and external communication. And I wondered if you could just give me your opinion on what the difference is today and how people can approach internal information being used externally, whether that's because it's being reported on externally or whether it's because that's the most relevant thing for the brand or company to say.
I think it's all a reflection of culture, isn't it? Culture and values. And I think the idea that you would have one voice at home and one voice outside of home is just doesn't work. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for us personally and psychologically. We're not the work person at work and the private person at home. And now I sound like my therapist. But I think that the how we act, how we behave, how we show our culture and values. When Julietta started the business 25 years ago, we were built on and are built on being clever, being considered, being considerate, and being countercultural when the time calls for it. And I think that is how we talk internally, and that's how we behave externally. And we also have a commitment, which is something that's attached to our working practice with our clients. So from our perspective, that internal and external voice should be one and the same. I mean, there's obviously internal messaging, which is private when you're talking to groups of people about the future of their jobs and about changes that you're making within the organization, or about an office move, or, you know, those kind of things that we used to talk about. It's different. But I think when you're showing brands who are really showing their true heart and soul, and that DNA is so connected to what they've always stood for, and they're approaching this situation with those values at their heart, the internal and the external become as one. And finding those two voices, I think also at a time like this, is frankly exhausting. You just want to have one voice to go out with and be consistent with that.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there's a total obliteration of what was appropriate before in my mind. And I think that brands can't suddenly start being something that they weren't before. The very overused word of authenticity is real. And I think that there are messages right now that seem very appropriate. And I think that data is showing that already. Don't try and be somebody who you weren't before, because it won't land. There are messages of, first and foremost, good wishes and solidarity and the togetherness. And any brand can give that message of, we're here for you. You are a very valued customer of ours, and we know that we're sharing. So I think that's message number one. What we're seeing a lot is number two is a message of self-care. How can we help you look after yourself? What can we possibly do to really help? As Daniel will, I'm sure, talk about later, our creative team has done a great job of actually thinking very creatively and using technology to our best advantage, etc., to make sure that the conversation remains open all the time. And then finally, the message of giving back in some way, as you said, Robin. You know, those really are the messages that brands need to be sharing with their customers right now.
You know, Robin, I've grown up in this industry. I love this industry, and I have been educated and trained by some of the kindest people with the greatest hearts. And the fashion industry gets a bad rap. And we know internally, we know as an industry, we know as a community, that there are good people at its heart. And frankly, that's what we want to see from brands internally and externally, because it's not fake, it's real. You know, and I think sometimes the perception of us as an industry can be just the glamour and just the superficial. And we certainly can be held to task about how we pollute and how we produce. And these are all incredible lessons that we will learn, and we must behave better. There is no question. But we're an industry of extraordinary talent, and we're an industry of an extraordinary kindness. And that sometimes gets a bit lost. And so I think for me, those people that can show that kindness, those people that can show that truth, those are the people I've been inspired by in my entire career. And those are the people that I want to be inspired by now. And those are the people that we're lucky enough to work alongside.
To sort of feedback, to sort of respond to both of your sentiments, Julietta, you mentioned that, you know, the message, you know, you outlined 3 messages, and those were the messages that were needed to be shared now, needed to be sort of heard. And similarly, Daniel, you know, this idea of inspirational individuals within a business. What would be your foundational approach for the kind of messaging that businesses are going to have to start thinking about, which is to keep the lights on? You know, there's I know that a one national fashion body, which I don't know if the data is public yet, surveyed their emerging designers, and over 90%, you know, expressed significant concern that their business would be impacted. Their business could be impacted to the extent that it would close within 6 months. You know, across the value chain, some businesses have deep pockets and they can ride this out, but a lot of businesses we know, especially with perhaps bigger brands and they have bigger production facilities and businesses, are going to have to start communicating to consumers within this much bigger moral narrative. How would you advise to, you know, and Julietta, you also mentioned data. What kind of steers do you take to advise your clients as to when and how that might be possible, and whether it is even possible?
Again, I'd like to answer you in two ways. I think that sort of in terms of the data that we're looking at, that's one question. But before I get there, Robin, I'd really like to talk about energy. And we are at the moment being bombarded with media. And in many, many cases, I would like to go so far as to call that propaganda. And therefore, that is having a direct impact on all of us. And I'd really like more ethereally to talk to start talking about human energy. And last week, Daniel was speaking to a client, and Daniel and I have decided very, very clearly how we're going to be communicating with clients over the last 2-3 weeks and into the future. And the client said to Daniel, without wanting to, tell you how extraordinary my business partner is, but the client sent a gift to Daniel's house to say it was the first conversation that he had had that had really lifted him and made him believe that he could and he will and we will. And I found that really extraordinary, and that's what communication can do. And I very often make glib comments like good communications can change the world, but I really do believe that. And I think that the telephone calls that Daniel and I are making and receiving are sometimes people from around the world who are grown men, business leaders in tears, through to, frankly, sometimes people that are wondering how they can make use of this situation, honestly, and others who perhaps feel that it's just them, that it's their business above all that is going to be destroyed or damaged so much. And we've taken a very much a conversational line of, we're here, we're your partner, we are your brand guardian, we are here to get through this together. We absolutely believe that we can. And if we can't, we will find ways to help you. And really what that has done is you can tell clients and friends and industry colleagues with the fear and panic in their voice really, really diminishing. And you can steer the energy of how we will approach this in a much more positive way. And that conversation of Daniel's was so valuable to me also, because it steered then how I spoke to people. If you get on the phone to people and say, Robin, this is all a big disaster, my business is going to go bust, well, that probably is not going to help. And so this realism, this positivity, and this strength, I mean, our company values of passion, of care, of strength, and of wisdom are really what are guiding us right now in every single syllable of every single phone call.
But Robin, I think, there's no sugarcoating this. There are going to be businesses that won't exist. And Julietta and I have said that we will rebuild from whatever is left. And I think what our creative industries show us is that they create magic from very little. And whilst there are extraordinary brands out there who have built amazing businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses who do have, they're all weathering their own type of storm. Mm-hmm. And those big businesses have huge workforces. Those are jobs to protect. Those are mortgages to pay. Those are children to feed. And I don't think that is exaggerating too much, whatever scale your business is. And there will be young, vulnerable businesses, even 10-year-old businesses that are small that won't weather this. But the very best creative thinking creates creativity from nothing. I've never, and yes, we're backed up by data and science, but, I've been in situations and seen shows, been lucky enough to see fashion designers present collections where I've thought, how the hell did you come up with that idea? And how amazing, and how industry, what a shift change that's achieved. And that emotion when you're standing at those fashion events and seeing that happen has got to come back. It will come back. It's still there. There is joy there, even though this is pretty bleak and horrid. But I don't think that you can sugarcoat it and say everyone's going to be fine. All businesses will survive, because they just won't. And I think government and I think different bodies like the CFDA and the BFC are doing their very, very best. But at some point, you've got to realize your business won't survive, and maybe it shouldn't. But there are going to be, as a result, some incredible creative thinkers out there to do different creative thinking rather than just designing a handbag or a dress. Those people's brains are extraordinary. And if, as you have and the team at BOF, you get to know those people and how they think, they're thinking in a world of artificial intelligence and data and insight, that human creativity is the most inspiring thing at the moment. That's the thing that carries me through everything.
How, and not to diminish the, our unique privilege to work in this industry where human creativity is such a huge part of it, but how would you recommend individuals steer that creativity through data or through, obviously you have professional scale data sources at your disposal, but how do you advise, how do you understand both the market and the world better to be able to advise clients through unprecedented times?
Julietta, do you want to?
Oh, I thought that was going to.
For me, I think the most extraordinary thing is having the power and the ammunition of data behind us to back up our creative stories. I mean, you think you've got a good idea because you've been working in the industry a long time and you have experience, or you hear, I get some incredible creative ideas from the youngest members of our team, and it just never ceases to amaze me. And sometimes in our industry and in communications, those without data, without science, those are just good ideas. And you're pitching them into a client, you're having the conversation with the client, it seems like a good idea. Where data and analytics comes in is giving us the science to back it up. The absolute authority to know when conversations are happening, what consumer sentiment really, really sounds like, to listen. And if you really listen, those creative ideas can be backed up by the most incredible, powerful insight. And you can walk in and speak to a CEO or a CMO and have these conversations where a good creative idea becomes much more powerful than just the idea itself.
How, you have clients that their businesses are global, and you have, clients with local businesses all over the world. How responsive have your clients been to learning the lessons that perhaps their peers have experienced because of the differing rates the pandemic has broken out across the planet? Certainly in the UK, our government seemed unwilling to listen or learn the lessons that other governments had learned in choosing its response to the crisis. And I wondered whether your clients were responsive.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing real modeling from clients where we're with the experience. I mean, those clients that are lucky enough to have global businesses are learning the lessons from Asia, seeing what has happened, and translating that into modeling that then works for the rest of Europe. There is a cycle to this. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in this situation at all. But what I do know is luxury shopping and the experience of luxury brands. And you can see how certain markets have emerged and then also been irresponsible and seen a second wave. So all that is unbelievably valuable. And I think actually our brands are remodeling that remarkably well, better than government even. I mean, they're sort of listening to their own internal data, seeing the experience, and most importantly, speaking to their teams on the ground. It's voice to voice, this communication. We've never been closer as a community. And the brands that are doing really well are listening to that, modeling it, and ultimately, hopefully, open sharing that, so that there is some experience that can help other brands who are less fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday, Robin, I reached out to colleagues and clients in Shanghai, in Milan, and in Rome, and in Florida, and in New York. And the difference of conversation just in terms of where those individuals are in their own countries around where the virus is and where the peak, as we've now been taught to understand this modeling of a pandemic, is in each market is absolutely vital in terms of how we advise our brands. And I think one of the words that I've heard used more and more in the last week is co-opetition. So that there's competition, of course, in price, in quality, in excellence of product and brand. But at the same time, I was talking this morning to the chief executive of an incredible hair care business out of Rome. And he said, oh yes, you're right, because the last 3 calls were with CEOs of my 3 direct competitors around the world. And we will learn from each other so we can help each other recover. Whereas normally he said, as a proud business owner of really the market leader, he said, I wouldn't be talking to those guys.
And I think it's the same within the communications industry. I mean, I've been on the phone, I know Julietta has, to a lot of our colleagues who run businesses. We've offered that to smaller businesses than our own. Certainly, bringing the communications industry together, speaking to people, understanding, and offering the lessons that we've learned. I mean, we're a different type of business to many, but just how we're trying to behave and learning lessons from the way that other people are acting too. And we've got amazing partners in Shanghai and Hong Kong who were just incredibly open to sharing their experiences, even the challenging and difficult conversations they've had with clients. And that was so inspiring to take those principles. I have to apologize if you can hear barking dogs. This is one of the joys of working from home. So
I need to apologize. I recognize that we've officially run out of time, but I think we can go on, given how great the insight is that you're sharing. But I wanted, just before we move on to how you're approaching, thinking about the future, just ask, there's a lot of opportunity to communicate new collaborations with what were previously your competitors, to communicate, how you're trying to give back and how you're trying to, how you're caring for your team, and, to really walk the walk and be, not to use the word authentic, but, that. But what are the risks? That's a lot of different types of communication. People can perhaps go too far. They can perhaps not go far enough. Is there anything, just quickly before we move on, that you would just give people as a sort of crib sheet guide to the risks of external communication right now?
I think, for me, it's everything is about people, not about profit and product. And I think if you are out there and you are pushing products still on your social media channels that isn't directly linked to making gowns or making masks for doctors and nurses, I think that you've got the wrong tone of voice. And I think that I was really inspired by Claridge's. We don't work with them, but we have great friends there who offered the Claridge's to the NHS to stay. And there have been plenty of other people who've done similar things. And you know what? That is going to make me head straight back there for a cup of tea as soon as I possibly can. Because frankly, in terms of the narrative that gives about what their culture is and what they stand for, that is earning my trust. And ultimately, for me, the external communications is exactly that. Use it for education, use it to entertain. I don't think we should lose the levity in all of this, because I think there's been some extraordinary humor. I think we in the luxury industry and in the fashion industry have to tread very carefully on that. But I think we can't just be this constant stream of product push. I mean, we did some work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We throw a rubbish truck full of fashion products away every this world. That will have stopped because nobody can get to the dump. So when we come back from this, let's be more responsible. Let's not push products. We need to entertain people. We're a community. We're broadcast channels. We're not just flogging product. And that really speaks to the heart of certainly the fashion industry, which is it's about the magic and the dreams of what we conjure and curate with for those who find in access products and those in the sort of highest rounds of couture. It's about dressing for something, but not just loading up landfill, frankly.
Julietta, is there anything that this experience has impressed upon you about the sentiment of the industry as a whole? There is this sense of partnership. How might that impact communication? There's also a sense that the scrappiness and the lack of polish in terms of the assets that communication will be achieved through may well change. What have you taken away on an industry level?
I think that, again, back to the first question that you asked me, Robin, that sort of agility is so important. And as a planner, all of those 6-month or 12-month laid plans just are not appropriate or relevant right now. Daniel, obviously, in terms of our business, he runs and owns the whole of the fashion side of the business. But as you know, we have a very big beauty and lifestyle business as well. So we have this kind of integrated client portfolio. And in the wellness and the beauty space, there is always an element of kindness and looking after people in that space. So I guess that to me, it's really just about being true to yourself. And the question that you asked Daniel before, to a degree, outside of making a bit of a fool of yourself, I don't think we can over communicate right now. We need each other. Humans need connectivity. As Daniel said, we've got this insane privilege to work in the industry that we, all three of us, work. And that is not lost on me, and frankly, it never has. But now, really, I think is the moment to be who you truly are and show the best sides of yourself.
And I think, whilst there are opportunities for quiet, there are opportunities for the community voice. Mm-hmm. And I think we're so privileged. We have these extraordinary platforms via social media, via all of these extraordinary connectors to learn more about our industries, to be nostalgic, to look a little bit back, and while we're trying to think about what the future brings. And I think that also, if you don't know what to do, it's okay to stay quiet a little bit and just choose your messages carefully, but keep communicating. And one of the things that we're being challenged to do, which I have to say gets me up in the morning and lets me sleep at night, is that the majority of our clients are saying, what do we do when this finishes? Get us ready for when this is over. Because when this is over, we want to be ready and primed for business, and in the right way and the most responsible way. And that's unbelievably inspiring to be made to think. So while we've got this time at home, while we've got this time to connect properly, a little drawer of ideas of what happens next, it's not a bad thing to focus on either.
I was going to ask you both what brought you hope, but I think you've both succinctly added it into your answers, and this has been a very inspiring conversation. But please do tell me what brings you hope.
I think that what brings me hope is that learning from the past, and the world has faced things like this before, and indeed much worse ones. And I think that the message that one looks at there is that enormous creativity and resilience comes out of challenge. And that, I think, should give us all enormous hope. The second thing is that because our lives have been completely changed from what we thought was normal before, I think that, again, for the benefit of your listeners, Robin, what Daniel and I are using this time for is to really question every single part of our business. And we are working hard inside of the 80-20 rule to reimagine our entire business, because we now know that we have to move forward to a better future. And something that I fundamentally believe any business should do is look at a new model that could potentially destroy your previous business model. And I think that that's really what Daniel and I, with some very trusted advisors, are doing in our evenings, is to be ready, as Daniel said, for when we come back, with actually a better, improved, more thoughtful version of the business that we had before, which indeed, as Daniel also said, will have technology and the use of data and AI much, much, much more deeply embedded in it, which I think will, I hope, make us even better partners and brand guardians for the responsible brands of tomorrow.
And I think from my point of view, what brings me hope? Our community spirit, how connected we've become, and learning this incredibly valuable lesson from Mother Nature. Maybe that sounds a bit high and mighty, but in terms of looking at spring still emerging in the middle of all of this hideous, I'm not going to lie, chocolate and the Disney Channel are helping. But But what gives me hope is the spirit of our community, and certainly of our team. When Julietta first designed the structure of the communication store, she drew it as a tree. And we see ourselves as the roots of that. And I can't tell you how inspiring the new green leaves are being at this moment in time. And that's our job, to continue to make sure that they're nurtured.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing not only your insights, but such positive outlooks in this time that we face as a community and as an industry. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you who tuned in. I hope it was instructive and constructive. BOF Live will be back next week, and BOF Careers has a variety of careers advice and insight on how to get through these challenging times, in addition to some of the best opportunities that remain. So I hope you all have a great weekend, and please stay happy and healthy as best you can. Thank you both, Daniel and Julietta. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Robin. Stay well.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye, Daniel.